Hi BookTube, it's Amy, and I'm back again with the Journal of Emily Shore. And this is the 1830s diary of a teenage girl living in the United Kingdom. And if you're new here, you can check out the Emily Shore playlist from the beginning. You'll find it on my channel page, or you can just listen to this video and pick up here. We are on page 181 in the year 1837, and we are beginning with the entry for February the 1st, which was a Wednesday. I amused myself with sketching on paper a scene which I recollect in a dream some months ago. It was a very beautiful and poetic scene. I thought I had entered a long series of chambers, hollowed out of the bosom of a massy rock. I passed from cave to cave, till I came to one which was handsomely furnished in a dim twilight. At one end were two great Gothic windows cut in the rocky wall without any glass or casement, but quite open and reaching down to the floor. I stood at the window and found that I was looking out into the open air. Before me spread the vast ocean, which came close up to my feet. There was not a wave or a ripple. The whole sea was perfectly calm, of a deep, dazzling blue. Above were the heavens of the same pure blue tint, without a cloud. The moon shone brightly and steeped the whole scene in her silver light. Around one side of the sea stretched a long line of dark and lofty cliffs, continuing those out of which the cavern was hewn. This cavern communicated by a Gothic arch with another, which also had windows looking out upon the sea. The whole scene had the brilliancy and splendor of a fairyland. February 7th, Tuesday. High Street greatly rises in my estimation. I saw it today to particular advantage, as it was fine, dry weather, and there was no market to cause a crowd. I now think it is a decidedly striking street. It has none of the advantages of regular architectural beauty. It is crooked and has not the least pretension to uniformity of building. But it is very long and sufficiently broad. The houses are mostly old and pretty lofty. It is full of gay and animated shops, and altogether has an extremely picturesque appearance. I particularly like the old houses with their gable ends, projecting windows, and rich carved oaken mouldings. The old red brick school, with its handsome perpendicular windows and two or one little churches, improve the appearance of the street. But the Guildhall, by projecting so much, spoils it, and the fire office and its Corinthian pillars is incongruous. And I notice she likes to bring up perpendicular architecture quite a bit. I think this is maybe the fourth or the fifth time that she talks about this perpendicular architecture, and that's perpendicular with a capital P. So it is an architectural style as opposed to something that's just perpendicular in nature. February 14th, Tuesday. I am sighing. I am pining for the country. I sadly miss, with deep retirement all around, my distant home, my lonely walks in the meadows, copses and orchards, the woods echoing with the songs of 100 merry birds, far from the din of towns and cities, and out of the hateful sight of crowded streets and carts and coaches and ugly houses, red and white, and all manner of hideous colors. How I do detest towns and love the peace and solitude of the country. So that's a bit of a shift from her previous week's entry where she said she was, starting to like High Street. Now she detests it and wants to be back in the country. And you'll recall, of course, that she's in the city and away from her country home for her health. Her parents have sent her away with family to live for 7 months. February the 21st, also a Tuesday. When I remember the delights of my country walks, the exquisite pleasure I enjoyed in watching the progress of nature in the opening year, and especially in listening to the merry and melodious songs of 1,000 little birds, I cannot help bitterly regretting the necessity which binds me to the neighborhood of a populous and noisy city for probably 3/4 of a year. I hope, however, that I am not repining and discontented. February 22nd, Wednesday. It is about 10:30 in the morning, and while I am writing, the view from these windows is singularly beautiful. The range of hills is of an indistinct blue color, very dark to the south, and dim and pale in the west and north. The city of Exeter beneath appears with extraordinary clearness. The noble cathedral stands out in fine relief. Its form is perfectly distinct. Every line is traced with exquisite delicacy and sharpness. Over the whole scene is cast a brilliant sunlight, which illuminates every building under its influence. St. Sidwell's spire shines as white as snow. Behold, while I have been writing, the whole scene has clouded over. The rain is falling, the wind howling, and the beautiful landscape is mournfully obscured. February 26th, Sunday. How thankful I ought to be for having so entirely escaped this awful epidemic, influenza. I dare say, as Aunt Bell says too, that Dr. James Clark fully supposes me to be now dead and buried. He had directed me to write to him from Exeter if I became worse or wanted any instructions from him. 5 months have now passed, during which he has heard nothing of me. When I left him, he considered me to have tuberculosis in my lungs, and he no doubt thinks that this influenza has finally carried me off. What would he say if he were to see me now, so much fatter, stronger, and less susceptible of cold? March 3rd, Friday. From whatever cause, a great change has of late taken place in my tastes, in one particular respect, viz., that I no longer feel the interest I once felt in works of fiction. Of these I have read but a very few, and they used to, at one time, to work up my feelings to a state of high excitement. I looked forward to the evening when they were read as the most delightful part of the day, and my brain was quite filled with pictures of the scenes therein represented. Now all this has changed. For instance, we are now reading the Bravo. I hear it with a calmness and indifference which I can scarcely realize to myself. The narrative makes no impression on my fancy. I never feel the slightest impatience to begin it or reluctance to put it down. The same was the case when we were reading The Water Witch, and to a certain degree even Ivanhoe, which quite amazes me. Perhaps if I had read them all to myself, they would have interested me more. I am reading to myself, however, Gil Blas, which interests me just as little, entertaining as it is. It can hardly be that my imagination is decaying, for my love and enjoyment of poetry is as vivid as ever, indeed more so. Thus I listen with greater pleasure to Ion than to Ivanhoe. But Ivanhoe lost much of its beauty by being badly read. I do think, however, that this change in my taste is no bad thing. It gives me a greater enjoyment of soberer and more useful reading. Another beautiful sunset. The sky was a glorious orb of fire, setting in a mantle of blue cloud. It was most beautiful to see him gradually lessening as he sunk behind the hills. His last lingering spark seemed to rest upon their summit like a crest of flame. March 6th, Monday. We hear that the country about Exeter is infested, just now, to a remarkable degree, by desperate ruffians who, armed with bludgeons, haunt the lanes and attack passengers. Many robberies have been committed and persons knocked down. The jails are filled with ruffians, and there have been discovered on the Black Boy Road 2 caves where the thieves deposit their plunder. March 7th, Tuesday. A minute before we turned into it, I observed to Dickon, "Now, if I were in the country today, I should hear the golden-crested wren and chiff-chaff." We then entered the lane, and forthwith the song of the golden wren fell on my ear. I was quite delighted, and presently spied out the little songster and 2 others flitting merrily about above some trees close to a white gate at the entrance of the lane. I stood and listened to the joyous song of this beautiful little bird. How sweet and yet how minute are its notes. It has begun unusually early. I perceive that it sings in a different tone from the golden wren at Woodbury, and the notes themselves are slightly altered. The difference between the Exeter and Woodbury chaffinches is very decided. The individual differences of the Exeter chaffinches also vary. Some hurry through their song in a slovenly way, leave out 1 or 2 notes, and run those at the end too much into each other. Today, for the first time, I heard the coal tit singing. Several were singing principally that variation of their song, which sounds like chikihi, chikihi, slowly repeated. The blackbird, hedge sparrow, wren, and robin were also singing. And then in brackets here as an editor note. Here follows a vivid picture of an illogical mind, a thing of which Emily had a keen and rather disdainful appreciation. And so that will be our entry for March 11th, 1837, which we will read in the next video here on the Journal of Emily Shore.